The Florida Gators have taken a less aggressive approach to recruiting this cycle, and how is it paying off? We're going to talk about it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Red work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And joining me now is going to be Brandon Carroll with All Gators of SI.com. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Brandon Carroll with All Gators. And Brandon, you've been here before. You know what this is like, but now it's a bit of a different time because now we're actually into the official visit cycle, into summer recruiting, and, you know, a lot of the June's going to be amazing stuff. Not so much, but so far through 2 weeks of official visits, Florida is, at the time of recording this, down a commit in the 2024 class because, of course, Chauncey Bowens, and we're recording this before Mike Williams announces his decision, which we think will be Gators. But so far, just what's your feel on how official visits have gone to this point?
Yeah, I think there's a lack of closing that they've had to kind of struggle with so far, but they put themselves in position to be able to land quite a few guys moving forward. If you think back to this time last year, they weren't landing a lot of guys outside or like right after the commit or the official visits, but a lot of those pieces did commit later on down the road. The first official visit weekend being the most kind of like being that one that people look back on and say, okay, they got a lot of these guys. So they're setting themselves up to be able to make these moves further on down the line, but there is a little bit of concern that it's not happening as quickly as many people expected it to be, including myself. I think Mike Williams, like you said, should be committing to tonight, and that could kind of kickstart where they go from here. There's a plethora of other guys that are kind of aligning at the top for, with Florida at the top in their recruitment. So it's really just a matter of trying to get those guys to close their recruitments before their desired timelines. I know a lot of these guys want to commit before the season or even drag it into the season a little bit for their senior year, but they're just not, kind of popping early, even though they're having great times on these visits and putting Florida at the top, if not the top contender for their services.
Yeah, and a big thing with this coaching staff, like you mentioned, even last year, it's like closing wasn't happening. They're not super aggressive. We've heard we're like, oh yeah, like they're not pressuring kids to commit. Which, look, I worked sales a bit. That was what I did. I was like, I'm not going to push you because then that's just going to push you away. But Gators fans are torn on that approach. And how do you feel about that? Where they're not super aggressive. We see kids come and go on campus, go for more visits, but worked out for the most part, right?
Yeah, I think it's all relative to who the player is. If there's a top talent wanting to commit, you take him and you don't think twice about it. But if it's a player that might be, high on your board that you feel that is lower or just in the middle portion of your board that you feel can go elsewhere, really decide that he's going to commit to Florida and stick to Florida, that you want to kind of, persuade to continue throughout his process and make that decision when that time comes and he knows that that's for sure what he wants to do. I don't have a problem with it. They did it at times last year. They've done it so far this year. Justin Denson, the cornerback from Rhode Island, is the kind of the main piece that I've seen from this cycle, even though Corey Raymond likes him a lot. And I do think that they end up getting him in this class at this time. But it's just little things like that with talent that might not be ranked as high that they want to test the process so they don't have to deal with the decommitment when a decommitment down the line or just kind of fluctuating pieces later in the recruiting process. They're really trying to find talent that commits and sticks to Florida. And whether that's, good or bad at this stage is still to be seen. But dating back to last year, it wasn't a terrible kind of process that they worked through. So they're just sticking with what worked last year. But obviously there's still room to grow as they need to land those elite talents.
Yeah, one of my things with the point of not really pressuring kids, which is what we've heard before, and I could be totally wrong about this, so feel free to say that. But I feel like for me at least, I was like last year I didn't think it was a good approach because last year the staff just didn't have time to do their little slow burn chip away at you style that they're kind of known to do. But I feel like over time this approach would work as long as you're winning games and not getting fired. I feel like that approach could work because you have more time to talk to these kids. You have more time to talk to 2025 kids already. So you don't have to really work that slow burn, or you don't have to worry about that slow burn style. But I feel like last year it was the wrong approach, but I'm kind of cool with it going forward. Is that stupid of me to be like, hey, like I'm cool with the slow burn?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's stupid. I think that there's a place for that, especially in the new era of college football recruiting. But I do think, like I said, there it is all relative to who the player is. If you're telling, a guy in the top 25 of the class to, hey, we want you to take it slow and make sure you want to be here, Bama or Georgia's getting them. And it's just like that's how it goes. So you got to really close out on those top kids. Meanwhile, you can allow the other guys that, you may not be as high on, you might have someone else in front of them. You might be willing to take him, but you're just kind of wanting to see how the rest of his process plays out before you get him in the class. I think that's a reasonable approach to the recruitment, you know, uh, process that they have at Florida. But I mean, it's at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because you don't take a player that you are high on that you think has potential, and then another team discovers that potential and gets them because they're willing to kind of play it faster. So it's really just a balance of, can we kind of have these kids hold off and still maintain that interest in the University of Florida? Because once you get a kid in the class, it's there's a better chance of keeping him than pushing him down the line and hoping he comes into the class. Obviously, you'll get flips, you'll get guys that move in and out of the class as the year goes on, but there's so many different scenarios that can play into it that it's kind of hard to see at this point if this slow burn process, as you said, is positive or negative for the University of Florida. And with only 7 commits in the 2024 class, you think they'd want to kind of pick up the process, even though, they have one of the best class averages that they've had in quite some time, even with those 7 pieces in the fold.
Yeah, and now ignoring Twitter and ignoring Discord, should Florida Gators fans be concerned with recruiting so far? I know that it's like not a ton of activity right now as far as getting these commitments, but and yeah, we know social media Gators fans just lighting it on fire right now. But should
Yeah.
Gators fans be concerned? And if not, at what point do you think they should be?
Yeah, I think if I so I wouldn't say it's time to press the panic button, but I do think there is a bit of room for just angst within the fan base just because they're not closing on the talent that we've expected them to close on so far. Came into the first weekend expecting 1, possibly 2 commitments. Didn't get that this weekend. Figured that Florida would be able to close on 1, potentially 2 guys. Might get Mike Williams later tonight, but other than that, it's just looking as if there's not much closure, which is always a concern. I don't care if it's in March or it's in December. If you can't close, you're not going to be able to support an SEC roster to compete against the likes of Bama and Georgia to compete for the conference title and the national title. And that's where ultimately where Florida's expectations lie. I do think that there is a significant, kind of difference between being being cautious and being like skeptical versus being pessimistic and thinking that the world is falling apart because they don't have commitments to this stage in June. I think by the time the summer ends, if the class isn't at least added a few more pieces, they're in like the mid teens in the commitment category, I do think it'd be time to panic. So like that 14, 15 range, if they can get to that by the time August or September rolls around, I think they'll be in a really good spot. But if not, it could be time to press the panic button just compared to where, because they've kind of loaded up in the summer. They've said, we're throwing all of our marbles into the summer official visits. We want to really impress kids. And a lot of them that they've gotten on campus are closing it down before the fall gets here. So if they're closing it down before the fall gets here, then it's like, all right, these pieces aren't in the class. Where do they go from here? And then that's where it kind of, you're taking seconds and thirds, and it's just not a recipe for success.
Yeah, just know that all of Gator Nation right now is just their finger right above the panic button, because they're always ready for it. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's up to $2,500 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, and today's Dinger Tuesday, which means you bet $25 on someone to hit a home run. If that person does not hit a home run, you get $5 back in bonus bets for every home run that is hit that game. So make some money, With FanDuel, you get to learn more at FanDuel.com/lockedon and earn more. Now with
I will say, I think there's several pieces that should, as of right now, I believe to be leaning toward Florida, and I'm pretty confident in a lot of those pieces. Obviously, there's some that I'm a bit more skeptical about, but in the grand scheme of things, there should be a drastic uptick here in the next, I'd say, from the last week in June to the first week in July, there should be a significant uptick in commitments in the 2024 class.
Any specific names you want to drop on us?
I can't. There's not necessarily anyone specific. Obviously, obviously Chris Jones is someone that is a big target for Florida. He's kind of going to be that third linebacker in the class if he commits with Miles Graham and Adarius Hayes. But he's someone that I expect to kind of, whenever I think he's supposed to commit either end of this month or into next month. So if someone is to pop, if there's one of them that I am comfortable dropping their name, he's probably the one that I believe is leaning most towards Florida right now and will be in their class by the time the summer ends, at least.
He's the one that for 2 months now I feel like I've been like, just get him, I just want him in the class. So
they're still in a very good spot for him. He was one of the ones I expected to commit last weekend, but decided he was going to take it slow and commit whenever his original time frame allowed him to, in terms of how he wanted to kind of go about his recruitment. But they're just still doing a great job. Bateman is the recruiter of the year at the University of Florida right now, and he's still looking to add. So I think Jones is in kind of the highlighting piece of what Florida wants to get done before August rolls around.
Which, how ironic is that? Because like in the 2023 class, I feel like Gator Nation was just like, not only kill him. Like I feel like they're just ready to get rid of Jay Bateman, and now he's got Miles Graham, Adarius Hayes, Chris Jones is great progress so far. Like that's just incredible.
Yeah, he's so when he was at North Carolina, he kind of proved that he would be like on 1 year and then off 1 year. It was almost cyclical. He would load up, get his guys, he would coach them, into the next year. He'd grab a development piece like what Jaden Robinson was for Florida last year, and then he would go into the next class and he would ball out. And it's just been an on again, off again cycle ever since he kind of got that position in the Power Five. And it's held true to this point at Florida. If he can make it consistent, he's shown that he can get it done. If he gets consistent where he grabs 1 or 2 elite players at his position a year, I think he's going to be the most untouchable assistant coach outside of Corey Raymond on this staff going forward.
Yeah, he's killing. And getting someone like Chris Jones is also like, Fairfax, Virginia area is not a Florida pipeline right now. So
that's where he's going to find a lot of success, because he has that background up there at Army when he coached there, and he built a lot of rapport with many coaches and just pieces that really respect him up there for what he's done and kind of the personality that he has and the resume he's built. So I think there's a lot that they can get from that DMV area with Jay Bateman kind of leading the pack up there, because you have Chris Jones, but you also have Aaron Childs that's also a Gator target at this point, and you have a potential to get 4 linebackers with Adarius Hayes in that scenario sliding down to the edge. So it's just, there's so many possibilities, and 2 of them could be from that region that Jay Bateman's controlling so well at the moment.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of just like basically expanding their recruiting map here for Florida, this is something that it's interesting to me, because you brought in Eric Garner this past week, was on campus.
Yeah.
He's from Illinois. That's not an area that Florida typically recruits. They have, I forgot his first name, Andrews from Massachusetts is going to be on campus this weekend. They're branching out here. How do you feel about that? Where it's, I mean, Billy Napier showed up and he was like, "Yep, we're going to wall off Florida." And then now 2024, they're like, "Well, we've got 2 kids from Texas. We're in it for more of them. We're going just everywhere and kind of expanding there." So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think obviously Florida's a hot spot in talent, and the primary focus is gonna be landing players that they believe can be immediate contributors from the state of Florida. But they have I think it's a 6-hour radius of where they will offer kids outside of the state of Florida. Just like they'll throw out offers to kids that they feel that are, either whether they're projects or elite talent, and then from there they are really picky about who they offer outside of that 6-hour radius. So you'll get some guys like they offered Jeremiah McClellan from St. Louis. He's a wide receiver. He probably won't end up heading to Florida, but he's someone that they said that they don't do this very often. So the pieces that you see coming in from some of these areas that aren't in that 6-hour radius are guys that they are really high on and they think that can be kind of these immediate contributors for them moving forward. And I think, and it's whether it's the entire staff or just one assistant like Corey Raymond and Justin Denson. I think there's a lot that says about the pieces that they're bringing in elsewhere. Texas is a state that they're going to try to anchor down because Texas is arguably the most talented state in America over the next few cycles. They have produced so much talent recently, and comparatively to the other southern states, they have the most polished talent. A lot of their talent, because of the effort that goes into producing in Texas at the high school level and kind of just throwing in all the facilities and development that goes into Texas high school football, Florida's going to really anchor down there in Texas. But it's just it's the most intricate process I have seen since I really got into this 4 years ago. Just seeing how they attack not just Florida, but everywhere else, and how kind of detailed they are and who they offer and who they think can fit into their scheme outside of that 6-hour radius that they really look to kind of hone in on whenever they have the cycle. So that's a long way of saying, that's kind of how they're approaching this area of the recruiting trail.
Have you ever seen where Hayden Hansen went to high school, what the facilities were like?
I have not.
Whenever you see him again, ask him to show you, because he sent me pictures and I was like, you've got like they have like a whole big weight room, big practice facility. Yeah. I was like, I know I'm from New York and we don't care about football here, but like
that's how Texas goes, man. Texas is, they treat it as if it is a professional or college sport. That high school football in Texas is just as big as college football. It's the real deal down there. So there's a lot to really learn. And I just seeing pictures and kind of getting an opportunity to go and just I was just driving. I went there a few years ago just to Dallas, and I got to drive past some of the high school football stadiums. I was like, oh my goodness, this is a college level stadium. They take it very, very seriously and they pump a lot of money into it. So there's a reason why Texas talent is rising on the, it's always been a thing, but it's just getting better and better every single year.
Yeah, the fact that you're saying stadium alone is pretty indicative of their investment there. But
yeah,
something with this past weekend specifically that kind of piqued my interest. Caleb Odom was on his official visit, and afterwards he said that the staff is showing him Kyle Pitts film and that they want to use him similar to that. Jeray Hawkins was on campus, and he said that Billy Gonzalez was talking to him about using him like Kadarius Toney. Billy Napier was talking about using him like Jalen Waddle. And that kind of piqued my interest because none of those players fit like the current Florida style we've seen under Billy Napier. It's just not how they've been used. Do you think that's more just like the recruiting game? And I think we know with that, or is it genuinely that Florida wants to start spreading things out and we'll say modernize in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't necessarily say they want to start spreading things out. because the identity for Florida football under Billy Napier is going to be running the ball. They're going to try to push the rock down your throat consistently, and we're going to see that again this season as Florida tries to figure itself out identity wise. But getting a quarterback in like DJ Lagway kind of allows them to open up the field in a way that they haven't been able to before. And so because of that, they're going to be able to use the guys like Caleb Odom in a Kyle Pitts role, or Jeray Hawkins in a Kadarius Toney role, or just other talents that have kind of had success at Florida in that scheme that Dan Mullen ran. It can still work in the scheme that Billy Napier wants to run, because just because it's a balanced offense doesn't mean it's going to be that 60-40, 65-35 style that we've seen so far under this regime, just because they didn't have the pieces outside to really make it work. I think there's a lot that goes into what to kind of building towards that, but I think that there's a legitimate interest in using those pieces like that, especially Caleb Odom. They view him more as a wide receiver than a tight end. He probably won't inline much or align on the inline much if he was to commit to Florida. And there would be a lot of kind of gadget. I don't want to say gadget because he's more than that, but there would be a lot of mismatch created within how they use him in the offense. So there's, a back and forth between, okay, they're going to run the football down, their throat, the other team's throat, and they're also going to try to utilize the talent that Lagway is expected to bring to the University of Florida. So it'll kind of fall more towards a 50-50 split between run and pass, I believe, if they were to get some of these pieces into the fold. And maybe it would result in a bit more of a modernization of the offense, but I don't think it's going to be like, oh, they're going to flip the script and, go away from the run game in total and kind of take the the air raid approach. That's just not going to happen. So
Cliff not coming to Gainesville.
No, Cliff is not coming to Gainesville. Still, he's not.
I know that some of my listeners just shed a tear because they love that man for some reason. But flipping to basketball now, where we talk football. That's great. Basketball it's coming up, and things are actually looking up as well for basketball here. Since we last spoke, Florida, Todd Golden, they brought in Zyon Pullin, and they brought in Julian Rishwain. Apologies if I just butchered that, but depending on where you look, top-ranked transfer portal class in college basketball right now. What do they kind of bring to the table in Gainesville immediately?
Yeah, there's a lot of variety that Florida really brought in this offseason. And it's more than just, those two that you named. They brought in multiple pieces that can contribute immediately. Zyon Pullin, I'm going to start with him. I think that he is the guard that Todd Golden looked for out of Kyle Lofton last year. He's a dominant scorer who can also facilitate and set up the offense in a way that allows Florida to kind of have a multifaceted offense. If they're in a stagnant set, just trying to find points, shooting cold or whatever, you have a guy that can go to the bucket and get a bucket for you easily. And it's something that they didn't have last season. They were really reliant on Colin Castleton throughout the early in the year, or Riley Kugel towards the end of the season, but they didn't really have those pieces that could create on their own when the offense isn't ticking the way that it is. Zyon Pullin is someone that can not only allow the offense to tick, but if it's not, he can go be a player that gets a bucket. So can Walter Clayton Jr. in the backcourt, who's going to be his backcourt partner. So just you have all these pieces that are going to be able to provide for Florida offensively, and that'll result in the more indicative kind of style of play that Todd Golden is trying to bring to the University of Florida. Rishwain, on the other hand, he struggled last season, but in his main season with Todd Golden in that tournament year, he shot over 40% from the field and from three. He's going to kind of be a spot up shooter off the bench, but he can create on his own. He likes a little left to right step back off one dribble once he touches the ball, kind of gets him in rhythm, and he's able to knock those down consistently. He can catch and shoot, so that's a positive, but he's someone that can kind of get them going from beyond the arc, get that rhythm, and potentially spread the floor for the pieces underneath, like Micah Logton and Tyrese Samuel, as they try to find their way into this mold. But there's a ton of pieces that they have and it's going to look very, very different from what it did last year. And that is a very good thing. I think this is a tournament team, like I've said before, now that they have that point guard, and it's one of the best rosters in college basketball heading into the season in terms of top to bottom, just having multiple pieces that can do different things. And really, it's a complete roster that they've pulled in here in this ahead of the 2023-24 season.
Yeah, I like that you said it's going to be different, and that's a good thing, because my next question was that's a good thing, right? Because they were just awful at certain points last year. It was not the most fun I've ever had watching Florida Gators basketball. And I do also, like you mentioned, this is a tournament team, because as you were describing this, like this sounds like it has to be a tournament team.
Yeah.
Great class, and just I'm bought in on Todd Golden. I'm assuming you are as well. That was no hesitation. So I love that one. But Florida also made a little bit of news for 2024's recruiting class this year. You have Isaiah Brown committed. Then you added Zyon Pullin this past Saturday, I believe it was.
Yes.
And how does that make you feel for where Todd Golden is positioning the team for the future? Because so much of the conversation that we've had just on the 4 or 5 times you've been here has been 2023. It's been the present, the transfer portal class that's going to contribute now. But long term, how is Todd Golden positioning this team for success?
I think the biggest thing I will say is you're seeing kind of this change of the guard in terms of how they recruit talent. So you're seeing them not only kind of focus on the backcourt or the front court, like under Mike White, you saw a lot of these pieces come in, but they just loaded up at 1 or 2 positions. And then they had, last year they had a lack of depth down low. Obviously, Tuan Gatkek transferred out right after Mike White left, but you only had Jason Jatobo and Colin Castleton down low. And that's just that neither of them were, Colin was, but Jatobo wasn't a piece that really could kind of be that backup player for Castleton, because they just didn't mesh in style. And so now you're looking and you're seeing like Isaiah Brown, he can be that number 2 or 3 and play off the wing, similarly to a Walter Clayton Jr. or Riley Kugel, in terms of just being able to kind of be consistent. He's not going to be as I don't think he'll be as like star as Riley Kugel, star power, just being able to kind of score at his own whim. But I think there's a lot of traits that are similar. The athleticism, the way he finishes at the cup, the way he's able to kind of create for himself. And then you look down low, they got Micah Hanglogton, who's a massive 7-foot rim protector. And that's exactly what you got in Zyon Pullin on a larger scale, because his wingspan is unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. He is a dominant rim protector at the high school and travel circuit level. And I think that there's a lot of optimism that should be kind of taken from how they built this roster and how they continue to build the roster, because you're just seeing guys come in and they're immediate replacements for guys they already have. So there's a mold. You see that there's a plan and they're executing on that plan, instead of just taking pieces that they have to find out how to use them because they haven't had it before. So I think that's really one of the big things they're building for the future, because they're not only getting the pieces that they need now, but they're looking and saying, how can we replace these guys when they do move on from this stage? And I think that's a big kind of positive for Florida basketball moving forward. There's a plan in place and they're executing it to perfection so far.
Yeah, I just want you to know, every time you say Riley Kugel, I just know that he plays 2K. I'm just saying that, like, the amount of step backs he plays 2K.
I've always kind of drawn a likeness to how Jordan Poole plays the game. It just looks like they're playing pickup at all times. I think that there's, they just are so creative in the way that they play. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it works whenever you're able to have the ball in your hands as often as Riley Kugel does. And so, there's going to be times where he takes a shot that you're kind of like, but it's someone that you want taking those type of shots because he has proven he can make them. So yeah, it's a different play style. It's not something that you necessarily see all the time, especially at the college level where everything's so team oriented. But if Florida allows him to kind of just be himself and play that kind of ISO ball on occasion, he can be a dynamic piece for them this year. I think he's a potential lottery pick in the upcoming draft if he performs the way he did over the past 10 games to end last season.
Yeah, I feel like having a player like that, like Riley Kugel, Jordan Poole style, where it's like, you don't want I feel like that's similar to football wise, having like a gunslinger quarterback, and it's like, oh, that was stupid, but I get it. Like I know you can do it, so I fully understand it. So I get it. I'm bought in on it. Thank you so much, Brandon. This was Brandon Carroll with All Gators, and yeah, I mean you're gonna be back. We know this. You'll be back very soon, but thank you so much, Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. Their recruiting approach, most likely, will be what comes up tomorrow for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And I will see you all tomorrow.